That's the really long story, not very short at all.
Well, hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to be talking about what I am currently reading. Per usual, I will cover everything that I have DNF'd, finished, am currently reading, or am hoping to read next since my last reading update, which should have been about a week ago. However, I should add a caveat that this week, it's actually been a week and a half ago for me. I was actually filming quite far ahead of when I was posting these videos. So even though it's been about a week since I last told you what I'm currently reading, don't be overwhelmed by the number of books. I did not read these all in the last 7 days. The first thing that I do need to mention is a book that's lying over there. Okay, and by the magic of the editing, I now have the book, and that is The Great Alone. My last currently reading, this is where my page count ended. I'll put it up on the screen. And I took off The Great Alone, but I had already taken off The Great Alone, so I need to add The Great Alone back in. So hopefully that has been corrected. So now we have the new number that I am working with. My goal is to read about 3,000 pages each month because I'm trying to hit 30,000 pages by the end of the summer. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to start with is my DNFs, and I'm telling you right now, there were a lot. I'll start with one that I just wasn't liking and turned out not to be what I thought. And that was Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh. I should have looked up how to pronounce it. Anyway, I was really interested in reading this book. I had tried to read it one time before and then didn't think I was going to like it, but had never started reading it. And so I think this was a free copy that I found at a little free library. And I started reading it. And one, it does that sort of postmodern writing, like, are we in a dream? What's really happening thing that I do not like. And then two, I didn't realize that this was sort of like I think it's World War One. I don't know why, but as historical fiction goes, that's just not a time period that I enjoy, World War One or two. So that was already a turnoff for me. And usually what I'll do before I DNF a book is I will then go and usually try and find in-depth video reviews about books and multiple of them to see what other people's thoughts were on the book, both people who liked the book and people who didn't like the book. For this book, unfortunately, I didn't find a ton of people who had reviewed it. And one guy who I did find, whose reviews I like and trust, found that his experience of reading this was sounding very similar to my experience of reading it, and he also wasn't loving it. And he did 4 different videos on it. If I can find his channel, I'll mention it below. But I thought he had a really helpful review, but it did make me realize that it wasn't just my imagination. The things that were going on in this book were things that I didn't like, and I think importantly were things that were going to continue through the story in terms of the writing style and the presentation. And I just wasn't sold enough on this book to want to keep going. So I DNF'd it. It is 402 pages long, and so that will be unhauled for me. The next book was one that I actually came to before Brideshead Revisited, and I believe I mentioned in my last currently reading that I was going to be picking up next, maybe, but it was on my January TBR, as was Brideshead Revisited, and that was The Monkey King. And I was super excited about this book, Monkey King Journey West by Cheng'en. I'm sorry, by Cheng'en, is sort of a mythical story that is ultimately about a monk who is journeying west, trying to find these Buddhist scriptures. He has 4 disciples with them. I believe one of them is the Monkey King. One of the things that I realized very quickly at the start of this book was that it was an abridged version, which I did not realize about this. I generally like to read unabridged versions first and then read abridged versions afterwards, if at all. So I was like, nope, that's not going to work. I did go do some research. I found an unabridged version of the book and started reading that because this was going okay, but I was like, I don't know. I went to the unabridged version and found that that was way more academic than I was thinking or wanting or desiring. It made me go, huh, okay. So then I was like, well, I came back to the abridged version and said to myself, okay, let me try this because maybe I need to understand the story first, which abridged versions are good for, before I go into academic reading of it. And I got to 10%, and that's been my goal this year is to get to 10% and then stop if I'm not enjoying a book. And to DNF it then. So I got to 10%, but I had to sit down and think about it. And I realized that with this book, it was just getting too weird for me. And I felt like I didn't know what was going on and that I needed the notes that were in the academic version of it. And then I realized I need to think about whether or not I really want to read this book. So this is a soft DNF for me, which means I'm stopping reading the book right now. I don't even think I've taken it off my story graph. I think it still says I'm currently reading it. And I'm gonna have to think about it and come back to this book hopefully before I move. So if I come back to this book before I move, I will have to decide then whether I'm gonna keep it or unhaul it. But right now, I'm just setting it to the side. It's not coming off of any page count totals or anything like that. I'm gonna go on my reader unhaul cart, which is over there, because that's what's happening with this book. Okay, so I'm keeping this moving because I have to go and pick up my son soon, and I don't want this to be a super ridiculously long video because I still have a lot of books. And they're all at my feet. That's why I'm pointing down. The next book was The Book of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk. I'm sorry, I'm like speeding into this video, so I did none of my homework in terms of looking up people's names. So I apologize, but this is the last time I'm going to apologize for that. If it continues to happen, that's why. Um, so this was Olga is a winner of a Nobel Prize, and I believe this was the book that kind of like pushed her into that category because she does have a couple of other books out. And this is a work of literary fiction. The premise of this book, which is basically about a false messiah figure that like a real event that happened, following this guy whose name is Jacob Frank, who was sort of a false messiah slash cult leader in sort of medieval Europe. I think it was 17th century Europe, Eastern Europe, and he goes through there, and she sort of did a fictional recount of like all the stories and different things and everything she could find out about this guy in the time period. That sounded really fascinating to me. I started this book. I picked it out during one of my reading sprints. I had a very weird experience with this book. I felt like I was in a fantasy novel where I was reading a magic book that every time you read it made you forget what you read. Because I, for the life of me, even though I felt like I understood what was happening as I was reading it, afterwards could remember nothing about what happened in this book. Again, I looked up videos. I found a couple of people whose videos I watch who liked it. One of them, again, I will mention her in the description if I can find her channel. She talks about the books of Jacob, and she gave like a lot of really good tips if you wanted to read the book. But by the time I was watching that, I went, oh, this is like another academic book where like I'm gonna have to really think about it. And that's when it really hit home to me that this is literary fiction, which is not a genre I enjoy. And it's not a genre I enjoy working at either, because even when I work at it and get it, I still don't like it. So I don't know what's going to happen with this book, but it's one that I sort of skimmed through a decent portion of her video. So I need to go back and read her video at some point in full, watch the video she recommended watching before reading this book, do a little more research, and then decide if I still want to read this book. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. This is also going on my read or unhaul cart, and I gotta admit, I don't know if it's going to make it off because really that reader and haul cart is becoming these books will self-destruct because they're gonna self-destruct by the time that I move. And this is gonna be on there and it may blow up with this. So I don't know. So that's going over with Monkey West. I will say Monkey West has a better chance. Um, that also is not coming off a page count because it's just a soft DNF, technically. So let's move on. That's all the sadness of DNFs done. Let me get into the books that I've finished since I last checked in. Okay, I've got this stack of books to talk about. These are all the books that I finished. Don't be super impressed if you got a glimpse because they weren't all that long. I was in the middle of two of these books the last time we talked. One of them was Vikram Seth's An Equal Music. I really ended up enjoying this book more than I thought I was going to. I started it and I was like, I talked about how it wasn't the book that I thought it was going to be. By the end, I was okay with that, and I actually really liked it. I wouldn't say it was like a great book or the best book that I've ever written, but if you really like classical music, string quartets, orchestras, that kind of, not really orchestras, I should say quartets and quintets, you like the music that they make, you are interested in how that works, I would read this because this book is about music, the love of music, and love. So I think the love story that is going throughout this is a really surprising one, very unexpected, with a lot of twists and turns, and keeps sort of a storyline going, while at the same time, there's a lot of talk about music in here. There's a lot of talk about the bonds that are formed between people who are making music, either in a romantic way or a non-romantic way. There are some special things about this book. I think what held it back from being a great book for me, or one that I would even say I would reread, is just the writing. The writing just was not. as good as I would have wanted it to be through the whole thing. That was like there were times where it was nice, and then there were times where it was just okay. Um, the plot and the pacing was a little bit slow at times, so I think those were some of the weakest things, but then at times the plot was also, like, one of the stronger things, but I think the best part of this book really was the conversation about working together and how musicians work and just sort of an inside look on that. I did make a playlist of some of the songs that are mentioned in this book. If you're interested in listening to that, you can look for it on my channel, and yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend this book. I'd say if you are in a niche group of people who really like classical music and quintets or quartets and really want to just hear a story that involves that aspect of life and music in it, then read this book. And Equal Music is 484 pages, and it will come off my page count. And I will sadly be unhauling this book. As much as I like it, it's just one I know I'm never going to reread. Okay, the other book that I was in the middle of last time was The Poppy War, and I did finish this. This is by R.F. Kuang. It is about Ren, who is a young girl who is in a very troubled empire and living a not so awesome life. And to sort of save herself from her problems, she ends up doing what she needs to do and testing into the empire's elite academy. And the story kind of goes on through there. It's partially a story of her trying to work her way through this elite military academy as a very much a poor outsider. And then the other half of the book is what happens when the kids in the military academy end up having to go to war. Um, this book has gotten a lot of hype on booktube and a lot of places in general, I feel, and I can see why. I have to say, for this to be her debut novel, like, chef's kiss on the writing style. I think that is honestly what pulled me through the book. Her writing is just so good and clear that there were times where, like, I felt like the story was even kind of dragging, and I didn't really care because her writing was still good. The sentences were still lovely to read, and it wasn't like the most beautiful poetic thing. It was just very good writing. And I didn't study it enough to be able to tell you why it was good, but it was. And I think that saved some of the parts of the books because I do think the pacing was a little bit off sometimes in the books. So, but not like horribly so. I would just say in a, this is my debut novel kind of way, like, but I still think it was a very strong showing for a first novel. And that if you like fantasy books, if you like military fantasy, I would say that this is a great book and that you should give it a try. I don't think it's a book for everybody. Um, so I guess I'd give it probably a very strong 3.5. It's not quite a 4 for me, but I would say it's would I give it a 4? I wouldn't just say it's a good book. I'd say it's a really good. I'll give it a 4. I'll give it a 4. So, but yeah, but I would say like you're gonna like this book better if you like fantasy, and especially if you like fantasy that's like military fantasy, that kind of thing. There's a little bit of found family going on in this, um, that kind of thing. And it is kind of harsh at times, though I wouldn't call it dark. I would just say that there's like good and bad going on in here. And there's a very interesting story and plot line. And I feel like it's kind of different than some other fantasies. So read the series if you're a series person. This is the only book in the Poppy War series I plan on reading. But I will read other books by R.F. Kuang because I did like her writing style. So I will try her books again. Poppy War is 527 pages long and it will be coming off my page count total. And I will be unhauling this book. I know, shocker, especially to people who love fantasy. If I decide to continue reading this series, I will get the rest from my library. It is not a series that I would want to read and reread, so I don't need to continue to own this, and I can pass it along to somebody else who might like it. This is a bind up of 3 books. You can tell the book itself is not that long, and Miss or Mrs. was not. It was a very short book. It was 83 pages. I really enjoyed it. I thought I was going to enjoy it because it was Wilkie Collins. It was a good quick read. It was surprising in many ways. So, what is it about? Miss or Mrs. is about a young girl, a young woman named Natalie Graybrook. I think that's her last name. It's something very similar. I should have looked that up. And anyway, at the very beginning of the book, she's been sick. She's just recovered. She's out sailing with her father and her cousin and some friends and just trying to get her health back. And it turns out that her and her cousin, yeah, it sounds gross, but you know, different strokes, different folks, Victorian period. But she's kind of like starting this like clandestine love affair in the background with her cousin. And I mean, they're like sneaking off
to closets to like smoochy smoochy. So like already kind of like, oh, okay, like what's going on? And but then one day when they're sneaking off, they overhear that the captain of the ship, who is like significantly like decades and decades older than Natalie, is apparently trying to convince her father to let him marry her. Her father seems very obsessed with money, and Natalie's finding herself in this situation where she is having to try and decide, does she just go ahead and continue to be the obedient daughter and do what she knows her family wants to do and live up to the family expectations, or does she marry for love, even if that means that she has to go a clandestine route to do it? So, yeah, you can already see the themes of like women, the choices that they have or don't have. It's adventurous, guys. For 83 pages, there is so much that goes on. You're wondering what she's going to decide. How is it going to work out? Is she going to end up as Miss or Mrs. at the end? And who is she going to be Mrs. to if she is? And the end of this book, literally, I think the last like little annotation I have on the very last page of this book is a shocked face. So if you could get a copy of either this book, which is a spine up, or probably like Project Gutenberg, you could find online, I'm sure somewhere, just Miss or Mrs. It's a good, quick, like mind blowing read. You'll really enjoy it. Oh, I don't know why I'm putting this over there. I am keeping this book because I do want to read the other two books in here. And either way, I'd be keeping it just for that one because I loved that story. So this is actually just going back on my shelf under the letter H for Haunted Hotel. Did pick up another book on the weekend because I was like, I need something to read. And I ended up grabbing A Darker Shade of Magic. So I did play my TBR game. I just did an extra pick and spin, and I think that gave me something that was, like, impossible. I don't even remember what the prompt was. The unicorn picked it again, i.e., thus it's the unicorn game because the unicorn just picks what I read. That's basically what's happening. I'm just pretending that I pick my books some other way. Anyway, I read A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I read this over, the previous weekend, and I had really mixed feelings about this. I know there are a lot of people who like V.E. Schwab. There are a lot of people who like this book. And this may be a controversial statement, but I read two fantasy books pretty close together. This one was way better written. This, I think R.F. Kuang, based on these two books, is a better writer. I don't know if that holds true overall, but based on just these two books, which are the first two books I've read by either of these authors, this was better written, was a better story. If I came back to either series, it would be this one. That said, this was not a bad book. I think this was a good book. My main issue with this was I thought the writing was good. I didn't think it was anything special. And so that led me to the problem of like when it says a darker shade of magic, like darker, yeah, should be in black, should be in bold, should probably be bigger. It really is dark. It's a dark book, guys. If you like dark fantasies where every single character is morally gray, it's not necessarily good versus bad. It's like questionable at best versus really messed up, then you might like this book. So, I didn't enjoy that. I haven't read a lot of books that are like that, but I didn't enjoy it so much in this one. It wasn't bad. I did finish it because by the time I was realizing, like, this is going to be a really dark book, there was a bit more violence on the page than I like, and there was some violence on the page in the Poppy War, but for some reason, I think because there were good people in there that you could like, it didn't bother me as much in there. And here it bothered me, and I really didn't like it. I found it a little too gruesome for me and too dark. And yeah, I finished it because I was past the point of no return by this time I started realizing that, and it was reading very quickly. So I did finish it. Like I said, it's a very interesting plot. I will say that. It is a very unique plot. What is the book about? I didn't even tell you that. So basically, there are four Londons, but now only three of them are in existence as far as anybody knows. There are only two people who can move between them, and Kel is the only one who can probably save all of them. So, how's that for a summary? I would recommend this to people who like dark fantasy, or even if you don't like fantasy, if you just like stories with dark settings and dark characters, I think you might enjoy this book. There is a lot of that in there, but it's very fast paced. It keeps moving. It is well written. It's just not the best written fantasy that I've read. And it might be your style. If you've never tried a dark fantasy, I would say try this book. It's not like horribly like depressingly dark, but it is darker. A Darker Shade of Magic was 398 pages. I did finish it. It will come off my page count total, but I will be unhauling this and I will not be continuing this series. I read both graphic novel 1 and 2 of Dune by Frank Herbert and Company at the bottom. You can see there. And I was really surprised. I've seen the movie. I mentioned that. And I have, that's all. That's all. I've seen the movie. And I really enjoyed these graphic novels. I did not find these graphic novels like too wordy because sometimes I see graphic novels and I'm like, I'm expecting more pictures and you're giving me like way more words than I want in a graphic novel. I thought this was a really good balance. The graphics were beautiful. I mean, so well rendered. Like the people like made sense in how they looked. This whole book is beautiful. I showed it in some other video. I don't remember what. It's gorgeous. So I read both of these just back to back. They were very quick, maybe like, I don't even think an hour both. I think they're both like 180 or 160 pages. They're the exact same length. So I'm sure that was intentional. Um, and book 3 of these graphic novels is coming out this June, and the second Dune movie is coming out in March. So I'm excited about that. I've heard that the second movie will obviously go into the second book. So, what else do I have to say about these? I don't know. So, I thought they were great. I think if you like Dune and you've been thinking about the graphic novels, I would say definitely pick them up. My husband has read all the books, he has seen the movie, he has read both these graphic novels. He really likes them. I think if you know nothing about Dune, I'd maybe watch the movie with a friend who knows a lot about it. That's what I did. And then read the graphic novels. I think the graphic novels give you more information than the movie did, but still maybe not quite enough to go in blind, if you know what I mean. I would highly recommend these. I gave them both a 5. I thought for what they are and for the genre. No, I'm sorry, not a 5. Not a 5. I'm not going to reread these. I give these a 4.5. Um, yeah, I'll give these a 4.5. They were really good. I think and excellent graphic novels. Like everything that I could personally want in a graphic novel. I'm by no means a connoisseur of graphic novels, but for what they were, they gave me what I wanted. And that's all I can say about that. These are my husband's books, so they will not count against my page count total. They will go back on his bookshelf. So currently, I am still reading 2 of the same books. These are basically just my longer monthly reads. One of them is The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Again, this is part of the Nathaniel read along. I am currently on chapter 14 out of 23. So I'm listening to this as an audiobook. I'm doing 1 chapter a day. And a couple of things. One, the house that is on the cover of this book, The House of Seven Gables, is an actual house that Nathaniel Hawthorne based this book on, and it's in New England, and it's a museum, and you can actually go and visit and walk around it today. Um, well, actually, technically not today because it's closed until the end of February 2024. So you can walk around it in March, which I did not realize, and I think that's so creepy. And I'm like, ooh, I'd want to go. Maybe, maybe not. Um, this book, I don't know what to think about this book. This book is so weird, and I want to like it because there are times where I do like it. And then there's times where I'm like, what's going on? Do I need to reread that chapter? Is it because I'm listening to it, but then I don't want to actually read it because I tried that at the start and I was not enjoying it because it did remind me that I'm not a huge fan of Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing style. His writing style reminds me of George Eliot's. That's all I'm saying about that. um, but I'm not disliking the story overall. And I thought this about the Scarlet Letter too, which was I was a bigger fan of the story of the Scarlet Letter than I was of the writing style used in it. And I liked the themes in there better than I liked the writing style. In fact, I pretty much liked everything about the Scarlet Letter other than his writing style. So I do have some thoughts about where I think I'm going to end with this book by the time I'm done, but that will have to wait. There's weird stuff going on it. This last section, there was a somebody got hypnotized and semi-possessed by this other guy kind of and had her life controlled. There's weird stuff that goes on in this book. That's all I can say. If you like a book that has creepy kind of weird stuff going on, this may be the book for you if you can handle the writing style. So I'm going to keep reading this. I am almost done. Like I said, I'm 14 out of 23, so 10 more days and I'll be done. I am also in the middle of reading Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. This is the first book in the Wheel of Time series. I ended up replacing Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell with this book, and I don't regret it. I have actually really been enjoying this fantasy book. I was really surprised. I have heard very hit or mixed things about this series, mainly being that it's very slow and dry and boring and da da da. The first chapter, not even the first chapter, the prologue, and what I'm basically calling the prologue to the prologue, if you've read the book, you know what I mean, was like confusing as all get out. I felt thrown into the middle of the world that I didn't understand and couldn't keep track of the people. Chapter 1 got going. It's been fine ever since. So it has made me realize that I do like high fantasy. I don't mind that. I do like, I actually think it's pretty fast paced. This is a really good story. There are a group of young men in a small town who end up being pursued by a dark enemy, and they're not sure why. At the very beginning, as their village that they're in initially gets attacked, there are two people to come to help them that they're also not sure whether they're friends or can be trusted or if they have their own motives. And so it is sort of a semi-found family. It does have that trope of like the journeying, the journey of fantasy where you're not quite a quest because there's nothing they're seeking yet, but they are traveling to try and get to a destination where they will hopefully be safe. Because right now, this entire book, they are not safe. They have been pursued, all of these pages that I have read. I am on chapter 33, which is page 476. I am reading about 40 pages a day, and that has been super easy to do. On the other hand, I'm also finding that after those 40 pages, I don't want to keep reading more, which is why like I've picked up other shorter books so that I have something else in between to read after I've finished my one chapter of this and 40 pages of this. That's only about 2 hours of reading a day. I'm very fortunate. I have a lot more time to read and I squeeze it in everywhere I can. So that's not enough for me for one day. But yeah, after I read those 40 pages, I'm like, ooh, that's good. It usually ends me on some nice little cliffhanger and see what happens tomorrow. So this is not going to be a 5-star read for me, and I can already tell you that. And I'm probably not going to pick up the rest of this series. I'm certainly not going to buy the rest of this series. Whether or not I ever continue it, we'll see. I'm not great with continuing series, but I'm enjoying this and I'm glad I've read it. It's, scratch that itch of curiosity. And if you like fantasy, if you like things kind of like The Lord of the Rings, where people are being pursued, and there's a bit of found family, again, it's not a quest. So if you like quest in your fantasy, this is not a quest yet. But if you like that, hunting pursuit kind of fantasy thing, I would say it's more like the Knife of Never Letting Go in that sense, but very different setting and pacing and feel otherwise. So I guess it would be if you took the characters in The Lord of the Rings and you put them in a situation where they were being pursued more like in the Knife of Letting Go, and you slowed it down, you would get the Eye of the World. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Okay, and because I'm reading 3 books right now, the final book that I am currently reading is Hell of a Book. So again, I finished A Darker Shade of Magic and needed to pick another book. So this was actually on my unhaul cart, and I'm so glad I got to this book, guys. Thus far, I am about 132 pages in, so almost halfway through this book. You can see here. And this book is incredible. I don't know how I slept on this book. I've had it for a while now. I heard a lot of good things on BookTube about this, and it also won the National Book Award. But you know how books can be hyped, and then you're like, do I want to read that? Yeah, read this. Black History Month is coming up. Read this for Black History Month if you're looking for a book. I can't think of a better book to read for that month. Amongst many other things, the reason that I would say that this would be a good pick for Black History Month is because I would say that this book has 2 major themes that are almost never dropped through the entire story. One of those would be just the ongoing idea of the shooting of Black men and Black boys in America. And the second one would be what it is like, what it feels like, the felt experience of being Black and of being a Black man. But in a very different way than I've ever read or heard those 2 things talked about. It really brings up, in a very literary, very surreal, but not difficult to read or understand way, those themes, and just what that experience is like. I'm just blown away. There are paragraphs on almost every single page in this book that has made me stop and think and rethink. I'm pretty sure this is going to be like, I'm predicting it right now, that this is going to be a 5-star read, that I'm going to want to read and reread and annotate this book. And I will be looking for a hard copy of this book so that I can have it forever and pass on to children and children's children's and children's children's, unless he royally messes up the end of this book, which I don't see happening. Like, no pressure. He's already written it. So good luck with that. Anyway, that's Hell of a Book by Jason Mott. I will definitely have finished this by my next currently reading. So if you want to know whether or not he messed it up by the end, come back and watch that. And then this time I will do a next up. So after I finish reading Hell of a Book, I for sure will have time because I'm sure I will finish that book in the next day or two. And so my next pick, which we did pick during my reading sprint, so that's a good reason to come to reading sprints if you want to help me pick my books, is I did get the letter D when I pulled and played my TBR game, and I got a seasonal pick. So it had to be a book that took place in winter or somehow was related to January. And my choices were between Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak and Doomsday by Connie Willis. And by one vote, Doomsday won. What I know of it, it is sci-fi. It is about time travel, but the unique thing that Connie Willis does in this is that they time travel to the past, and it's usually a time period you're not expecting. I believe in Doomsday book, they travel back to medieval times. So I'll be interested to see how they do that. And to say nothing of the dog, they travel back to Victorian times in England. And that was a hilarious book and really interesting. And she kind of makes fun of a lot of science fiction things. I'm hoping there will be a lot of that same thing going on in here, especially the comedy. She was so funny and is so intriguing a writer. I laughed until I cried in the Dooms, and to say nothing of the dog, which was she wrote and was inspired to write part of that book based on 3 Men in a Boat. So I'm looking forward to Doomsday book. I'm hoping it holds up and is just as good as To Say Nothing of the Dog. And if not, I blame those who picked it. So I'm just kidding. So that's what's next up. I'm really excited about that. So that's it. Here are, oh boy, here are all the books that I have read since my last check-in. Maybe it's just as well that you can't read all the spines. So yeah, that's what's been going on in my last week and change. Per usual, some books I DNF'd, some books that I finished and loved or enjoyed, some books that I'm reading that I'm feeling all sorts of different ways about, and the like. So let me know if you have read any of these books and enjoyed them. If there's any that you want to read, keep watching if they're ones I haven't talked about yet. Sorry, I know this was really quick recaps of all of my thoughts about them, but like I said, I'm still going to have to edit this video to keep it from being an hour long. So there's no way I could have said more about any of these things. But that's it for today. Like and subscribe to hear more about what I am currently reading or about to read, and I will see you next time. Bye.